Hey there. Let's start with introductions.
My name is Carolyn DeSimone, and I have a super cute dog. His name is Professor Timbit. He's a professor because he's always researching something.
My name is Holden Karau, and I'm trying to make health insurance suck a little bit less.
Carolyn and Holden are married, and I talked with them in September because listeners had been sending me links to a story from the San Francisco Standard with the headline, "Make Your Health Insurance Company Cry. One woman's fight to turn the tables on insurers." That woman was Holden. She works in tech, and the story was about a tool she had built to help people fight health insurance by writing appeal letters, using AI, of course. She's made it available at a website, fighthealthinsurance.com. And I lose count of how many of you sent me that link, but thank you so much. Holden and Carolyn live in San Francisco. I talked to them on Zoom with local reporter Lee Romney setting up mics for the two of them in their living room. And the bookshelves I could see in the background had, along with books, lots of little stuffed creatures. When I squinted, I could see a Pikachu.
So there's a few Pikachus, actually. And we have a stuffed poop. It's a wombat poop. That's why it's square. Here.
And Lee can't help commenting when she sees the wombat poop because it's brown, plushy cube with a face.
It's a very regular-looking turd.
Wombats have square poops, so they don't roll away.
Oh, I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
haven't been to
they have
Australia.
special muscles in their buttholes to make square poops.
This is the most fun Zoom I've ever been on, actually. And we were just getting started. This is An Arm and a Leg, a show about why healthcare costs so freaking much and what we can maybe do about it. I'm Dan Weissman. I'm a reporter, and I like a challenge. So the job we've chosen here is to take one of the most enraging, terrifying, depressing parts of American life and bring you a show that's entertaining, empowering, and useful. As you might imagine, Holden's decision to create Fight Health Insurance draws on both her significant professional expertise. You know, she's worked for Google, IBM, Apple, and now Netflix, and has written several technical books about programming, and her personal experience fighting health insurance. Also significant. And the reserves of anger and cussedness she got from those experiences.
I try and be a nice person, but health insurance does not bring out the best in me.
I don't think it brings out the best in anyone.
Certainly no one that I know.
Holden's gender transition provided lots of experience.
Being a trans person in America, you have to navigate health insurance.
For instance, early on, Holden says she learned something I didn't understand until I'd been working on this show for a while. If you get health insurance from your employer, it's pretty likely that your state's insurance laws don't apply to your plan. Instead, your plan gets regulated by the Federal Department of Labor under a federal law called ERISA. Holden knows a lot about ERISA. And in fact, she had to think for a minute about when she picked it up.
When did I learn about ERISA? I think I knew what an ERISA plan was from IBM.
Oh, yeah, because IBM got you boobs.
Yeah, IBM paid for my boobs. Originally, I was going to get a tattoo saying, sponsored by, but no.
Holden says her fighting insurance game and those reserves of anger, they leveled up in 2019.
Yeah, when I got hit by a car is when I started reading health insurance regulations, because I didn't have a lot else to do, and it was also really important that I figure it out.
Holden had been riding a brand new Vespa. She was on 16th Street in San Francisco's Mission District. Carolyn picks up the story here.
A woman pulled out of the parking lot of the Safeway to turn left without looking?
Yeah, across 4 lanes of traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Holden says she ended up with 2 broken wrists, some broken bones in her legs, and it didn't take long for her to start thinking about medical bills, even though she was on some very strong painkillers.
I think while I was still on fentanyl, I was thinking about insurance.
Yeah, she was thinking, this is going to be a lot.
Out of the trauma bay, but possibly not when you were out of the ER, was the first time we thought about what's this going to cost.
But they say the actual haggling with insurance, it didn't start for a few days when it was time for Holden to leave the hospital and head to rehab. Her insurance, she says, had a place in mind.
They really wanted to send me somewhere really, really shitty.
We looked at the reviews of them.
Yeah, and it's they're actively being investigated by the state.
For hitting their patients with things?
Yeah. Yeah, it was no, I don't want to go there.
Carolyn says she pitched in a lot to help get Holden to a better rehab. But then they say there were battles over how much treatment Holden would actually get. And by that time, Carolyn says, Holden was ready to go right at it.
Once you got to the rehab, I think you started reading the forms for fun.
I didn't have a lot going on at that point, and I was still on opiates, but the opiates were less strong, so my brain was starting to work again.
You got bored.
Yeah.
Holden says her brain was working, but not her body. She couldn't hold a laptop or really type or get out of bed to pick up her phone if it fell to the floor. But even with broken wrists, she was ready to fight for the rehab treatment she needed.
In this case, it ended up working out okay. And part of that was my willingness to just take things to an unreasonable length. I was like, really, I have nothing to lose here, so I will sue you. I am bored.
Holden says it helped she could afford a good lawyer, especially because there were more fights ahead. She says she had to fight for special crutches because she couldn't use regular ones with broken wrists, and for more physical therapy when she got home. And there was an epic fight to make sure medical bills didn't completely devour any settlement from the driver's car insurance. This was a next-level legal education. Holden says it took 3 years to get all the legal issues resolved. And meanwhile, she discovered she developed a superpower. Well, maybe call it a special interest. Because she noticed if somebody at a party, say, started talking about a problem they were having with health insurance, she was ready, eager to just take them down the rabbit hole.
They'd be complaining about a thing, and it's oh no, yeah, this sucks, and they totally do that, but there's actually a thing that you can do. This is a thing that I know how to do. I like helping people.
But conversations at parties, they weren't that much of an outlet.
I don't get invited to a lot of parties because not a lot of people are I would love to hang out with that lady that keeps talking about ERISA regulations or the Affordable Care Act.
And then in January of 2023, Holden was talking with a friend at a tech conference.
He has family that also has perhaps a non-standard level of experience with insurance. And so we were talking about generative AI.
Yeah, generative AI. ChatGPT had been released less than 2 months before. So Holden and her friend ended up thinking,
you know what? We could use this to actually make the world suck a little less.
Could use these new generative AI tools to fight health insurance, like by having it write appeal letters when claims got denied. An idea was one thing. Making something would take more. Holden used what she knew about herself to make that happen.
So there's different kinds of motivation, right? There's deadline-driven programming, which is when you agree to give a talk at a conference, you're okay, I need to do this by this date. Otherwise, I'm going to look really bad in front of a bunch of people. So I'll do that a lot. But the other equally strong motivation, I think, is hate. And I hate insurance companies because they've just they've been so mean to me and my friends.
So then a few months later, another conference provided an opportunity to combine those motivations, a hackathon, a competition where engineers and developers get a limited amount of time to put a project together.
I was okay, I got some time. I'm going to work on this for the hackathon.
So that gave her a deadline, 30 days. And her project came in third.
Which not fantastic, but not terrible,
Yeah, third out of more than 50. Plus, it worked. Kind of.
So it would say things this procedure should be covered because of the llama virus. And it's just oh, well, that's not a real thing. But good try, right? And it was it's interesting. And it kind of sort of works, but it's not great, right?
Yeah, getting to the next stage would require a new approach and some motivation, more rage, which came from a surprising source. That's next. This episode of An Arm and a Leg is a co-production with KFF Health News. That's a national nonprofit newsroom producing in-depth journalism about health issues. Their reporters do amazing work, and they win all kinds of awards every year. We are honored to work with them. So Holden came out of that hackathon with something that kind of worked. Kind of. And then she says she found herself in a fight on behalf of somebody else in her household.
Timbit, our dog, who's amazing, I love him, he had a bunch of dental work done, and the pet health insurance people were jerks about that. And so
They said he didn't need anesthesia to have teeth pulled. They rejected the anesthesia. He's 11 pounds. He can't be awake during...
I don't even know if, I don't know anyone can be awake for that. And so I was like, okay, cool. How can I put the screws to them? Because you were mean to my dog. I'm used to health insurance companies being mean to me, to the extent that I'm almost numb to it at this point. But, my dog is precious and perfect. I read the plan documents because I'm a nerd. And, this is not your obligation. You are obligated to do more. You would have to prove that this is not necessary, and I don't think you can do that.
Holden says she also read up on state regulations for pet insurance and let the company know she'd found grounds for some potentially serious challenges.
And that, along with some other, perhaps less than polite words, did result in them changing their opinion about whether or not he should be awake for getting his teeth pulled out.
Well done.
Yeah. Well. And then it was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I should put in the time to finish this.
Finish this tool to fight insurance companies.
I've got this thing that's kind of half-baked, but I should take this over the finish line. Screw these insurance companies.
To do that, she was going to need some data to train her AI. The technical term is large language model, or model for short.
Because the big problem, and part of why we got this llama virus thing, is when you don't have data to train a model, it's bad, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. And this is also part of why a lot of large models on the internet are bad. They're trained on Reddit.
Yeah, so they learn how people use language, but they don't learn facts. They're like a really smart 18-year-old who hasn't done the reading, but they're really good at bullshitting because they know what an answer sounds like in this context. So Holden needed to train her model on a bunch of factual data for health insurance appeals and denials. And she found it. Thanks to the California Department of Insurance. So if your insurance denies a claim and it's regulated by the state of California, you can request an independent medical review from the Department of Insurance, which decides whether your procedure was medically necessary. And every decision gets published online, describing the facts, the diagnosis, the procedure, and the reasoning behind the decision.
And that's the information that you want, right? You want to know, for a diagnosis and procedure, why is this necessary? Why should the insurance company have to cover this?
And all of that information was in this data for many thousands of appeals, many thousands of decisions.
I found the independent medical review data, and it's okay, cool. I can use this to make the model better.
So Holden started whipping the model into shape. And after about 6 months, she paid a developer to work up a web version, something you don't have to be a tech person to actually use. And she bought hardware, servers. All told, Holden thinks she spent maybe $10,000 plus, a year of nights and weekends. So in August of this year, she had something ready to show the world. So she emailed a local reporter who'd been writing about health insurance.
I'm this local kid who's been working on this thing. It seems like it might be kind of on your beat. If not, absolutely no stress, but let me know. And if you want to chat about it, I'm happy to jump on my Vespa and swing over and I can talk with you about it and I can show it to you. And she emailed me back and was yeah, that sounds cool.
What Holden showed that reporter, pretty much what you see now at fighthealthinsurance.com, it's not a magic wand. It doesn't do everything for you. You've got to make a scan of the denial letter from your insurance company, and you got to run it through optical character recognition, turn it from an image of text into actual text. Oh, and you got to zap personally identifiable information like, your name and address from that document so that none of it gets captured by any machines. And you can also write up a narrative with any details. That's optional. Seems like a good idea. And you can upload documents from your insurance company, like stuff that describes your benefits. That also seems smart. So you feed it everything, and it gives you back a draft of an appeal letter. Actually, more than one. So you can pick and choose and make edits. So there's some homework. And it all still looks kind of early stage. The site is not super pretty. And you know how early, not quite officially released software gets called a beta release? This one says alpha, earlier than that. So no guarantees. But it's something. And Holden showed it to that reporter, and the result was the article that a bunch of listeners started sending me. By the time I talked with Holden and Carolyn about 3 weeks later, Holden said about 300 people had used it, and she'd been keeping an eye on how it performed.
It seems to generate things that look good, right? Which this is important to me. I also get emails from people saying like, cool, thank you, thanks for doing this. So that's pretty rad. But like, I assume that you get some of the same stories, and there's some people where they reach out, they're like, hey, this is my specific situation. Like, what can I do? And it's often just like, I wish I could help you, but like, this is just completely fucked.
I do get those emails, of course, and never gets easier. And I should say, if you've written me and I haven't responded, like, don't assume it's because your situation is completely fucked. It's just as likely that I am just not keeping up with my email. But I really appreciate you writing to me. No matter what, I learn so much, including things that don't suck at all, like when a bunch of you wrote to me about Holden and her project. When we talked, Holden said she hadn't gotten much information about whether those appeals were working. Insurance companies generally give themselves like a month to respond to appeals, and, just hadn't been that long yet. And meanwhile, there's the question of where this project could go next.
Do I do it for like more than evenings and weekends, or do I do it for evenings and weekends? And I don't know what the answer to that is yet.
Holden had ideas about ways it could earn income, like maybe charging doctors and other providers, but, keeping the service free for patients. And when I asked how much it would cost to take Fight Health Insurance to that next level, make it available to and useful to, everybody who might need it, and keep it up to date and keep it reliable and stable, she started thinking, and the numbers kept going up. 100,000, 200,000, 3, 4, 5, more. A few weeks later, Holden came to Chicago, where I live, for a conference. So I went to meet her, and, I got an update.
There's some people who like sent in their appeals and things got approved, and that's pretty awesome. I'm pretty stoked with that. I guess the other thing is like people seem generally positive and happy, and so like yeah.
Thank you for this thing that didn't exist before.
When the alternative is just giving up hope, like this is so much better than just going like, God damn it.
She was still puzzling over how Fight Health Insurance could grow. And she said when she asked a friend with experience in the startup world for advice about talking with business or venture capital folks, her friend's response was pretty immediate.
What are you doing?
Right.
No. They're going to like, they're going to lead you down the path that you are trying really hard to avoid.
Like charging patients for money, or maybe harvesting their data for who knows what kind of icky purposes. Basically, turn into another shark.
This is probably just my naivete, but I have this belief that the consumer version should be free always. And so one of the tricks would be finding someone that agrees with that, who's willing to give us money. Because otherwise, it's like, nah, it's cool. But then also like the second question is like, is there a way to shift the economics of denials such that like insurance companies have like, it just costs them more to be dicks, right? And so, like,
assuming she finds the right kind of partner, there's a question still of how Fight Health Insurance would earn money to keep itself going. Holden's still interested in the idea of selling a paid version to doctors and other practitioners. And when we talked, she'd started hearing from some folks in that world.
Of the professionals reaching out, a lot of them were from the mental health field. And like, that's an area that I feel strongly about. Like I would not be here if it was not for access to mental health.
Meanwhile, she says she's squeezing in about a day a week for the project, in between her full-time job and the rest of her life.
It's probably not super healthy. There's this whole trading sleep thing, which is in the long run not a great bargain.
So you've been thinking at some point there'll be some choices to make. And
yeah. I mean, realistically, probably January will be when I know if I can like work on this more full time or not. Otherwise, it'll continue to like exist as the like thing that I do when I have free time and no one's looking too closely.
For now, Holden's taking things one step at a time.
One of the other things that I'm reminded of is what my therapist reminds me of so frequently is that we are not responsible for fixing the world. but we must participate in the world's healing.
Yep.
I think that for some of us, our existence is enough. But when we can, I think it's good to find the small things we can do, because otherwise we would do nothing.
Yeah.
And let me just say, amen. If you give Holden's tool a try, I am super curious to hear how it turns out. And if you do, I should mention the privacy policy on Holden's site says if the enterprise ever gets, say, sold, then whoever buys it could end up with any data you give it. So Holden actually suggests maybe create a temporary email address for working with their site. Just in case some shark ends up with this stuff. It needs an email to send you its results. The site asks for a name, too. You could consider using a fake one. We will have links to fighthealthinsurance.com wherever you're listening to this. And we'll be back in a few weeks with a brand new episode. Till then, take care of yourself. This episode of An Arm and a Leg was produced by me, Dan Weissman, with help from Emily Pisacreta and edited by Ellen Weiss. Adam Raymunda is our audio wizard. Our music is by Dave Weiner and Blue Dot Sessions. Gabrielle Healy is our managing editor for audience. Lynn Johnson is our operations manager. B. Bosco is our consulting director of operations. An Arm and a Leg is produced in partnership with KFF Health News. That's a national newsroom producing in-depth journalism about health issues in America and a core program at KFF. It's an independent source of health policy research, polling, and journalism. Zach Dyer is senior audio producer at KFF Health News. He's editorial liaison to this show. And thanks to the Institute for Nonprofit News for serving as our fiscal sponsor. They allow us to accept tax-exempt donations. You can learn more about INN at inn.org. Finally, thank you to everybody who supports this show financially. You can join in at any time at armandalegshow.com/support. Thank you so much for pitching in if you can. And thanks for listening.